Welcome to the Canary Report, the podcast where risk leaders, safety professionals, and operational executives come for real-world stories and smarter strategies to keep people safe. I'm your host, Michael Zhao. In each episode, I sit down with exceptional leaders who are transforming how risk and safety are managed. Whether you're a leader of a nationwide EH&S program in a high-risk industry, or you champion workplace safety across 200 retail locations, this podcast is for you. Let's get into it. Hello, everybody. Our guest today is Brett Smith. He's the Global Safety Director for Gardner Builders. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. This one's going to be about safety leadership, mental health, trust, building a culture centered around high-risk environments, but still making sure that the people are taken care of both physically and emotionally and mentally during doing their job. The conversation couldn't be more timely with rising pressures in the construction industry, with the shrinking internal resources, as we all unfortunately have to deal with, workforces dominated by subcontractors that in our industry are human. And so they have challenges that we all deal with, right? And having your approach, you're running a basically close to a $500 million construction firm that you guys have now, over $400 million, and you're the head of their safety group. So it's a big job. And I really do thank you for joining us. And from this episode, what I hope to accomplish, that we can talk about things very openly, very candidly, have a good chat, learn about each other, that we'll learn about kind of the frameworks that you're putting in place for mental health, which is awesome. It's one of the reasons we're talking today is because I reached out when I saw a couple of posts you did. Some of the tactics that you're using and around managing safety, subcontractor heavy environments, like what your best practices are, what you enjoy and what you do, and then look at your perspective on all things safety. So with that, I really appreciate you joining us and let's dive in.
Absolutely.
All right, my man. Thank you. So I want to first let you know that I look at everything from a human perspective. That's kind of how I roll as a person and as a father and as a husband and as a leader of people. So I want to know about you personally. Tell me about your journey, like as brief or as long as you want, just how you ended up where you are.
Yeah. So I come from a pipelining background. And prior to having entered into that particular space, I had been everything from barista to a banker to merchandiser and forklift operator. So jack of all trades, master of none in so many ways. And coming up, I've always had a tendency to learn things the hard way. So fast forward through a variety of careers and backgrounds and lots of lumps and bumps along the way, I can credit a lot of that for where I am today. In terms of my now professional background, what I do for a living and how I strive to do it in a really, hopefully special kind of way. Personally, I'm married going on 26 years, have an 18-year-old daughter, 15-year-old boy. Daughter just graduated high school. My son just completed driver's ed. And so thus begins that chapter. So really an exciting time in my life personally and then professionally. Just something like this, having had only one opportunity similar to this before. So certainly can't claim myself to have any sense of masterclass design on this, but it's an honor. And I do appreciate you having me.
Oh, of course. I'm actually going through a similar journey. My daughter just finished driver's ed as well. With your son, but same age. My son is just in college and he's the second year. So is your older one looking at going to school or trades or something like that?
She's going to go to school at the University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire, which is right at 2 hours from home. So just far enough for her to have some independence and close enough. We still can hopefully see her some degree of frequency, but she'll be majoring in psychology. So that'll become more and more interesting.
Well, I'm sure hearing all the things that you do, which we'll get into, will probably help to shape her a little bit on that. So I'm reading a quote here or paraphrasing a quote here. And you said that safety is human. And in order to run a safety program effectively, that you have to understand how humans operate and how humans think about things, both from a boardroom perspective of managing people who have timelines and goals and structures, but then you also have people who have pressures. And so the mental health aspect, I know you're very passionate about. So from your perspective, leadership, and even more so than leadership, how have you gotten the workers in kind of a machismo, construction's not always a touchy-feely world out there. And so bringing up mental health and bringing out things like you have done, which we'll talk about in a second, how has that been received and how have you implemented those types of things? How do you feel about that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. It's tricky. I think for starters, you enter into it, whether you're talking to folks in the field or you're talking to a boardroom, full of leaders and those that may or may not necessarily identify with those who are representing boots on the ground. You approach it with a sense of vulnerability. I think you lead into it, owning it first, and just sort of addressing that elephant in the room. If it's something you want to talk about, then you lead with, I want to talk about this because I've recently heard this. Maybe it's a quote, and the quote means a lot to me, and I think it resonates in this space. So just recently I heard a quote, and it's more of an overarching theme to a book that I'm listening to. But that quote is less but better. And at Gardner, we've adopted a saying, better is perfect. So not to confuse the two, but in my mind, the two really flow one to the other. But starting with simply less, I think within this space, we try to take on everything all at once, right? Because it's such a heavy topic. We look at it as a crisis, and it is when you look at the rate of suicide, even specific to construction.
It's 3 times the national average,
if not more. And so it's daunting. And yet we try to take it all on at once because we truly want to disrupt the industry in order to affect change, to affect positive change. So having just recently heard this, less but perfect, that for me is a game changer. So rather than trying to take on everything all at once, if you're in a position and you're talking to the boardroom or you're speaking with guys in the field, I think we need to recognize the power of the pause and just slow down. So a lot of the things we're doing, which I know we're going to talk about, we've probably come at it from all sorts of angles, sometimes headlong, and it's been probably too much, too fast, but it felt right in the moment. And I think we're beginning to realize it's not even less is more, it's less but perfect. So we slow down, we take a micro bite at a time, and just really focus on individuals who want to join us in that initiative, in that effort. So it's collaborative and it's mutual and really organic in that way.
Have you noticed a morale change as you've implemented some of these things? Have you noticed the shift in the worker, the folks that are on the site? And then along the same lines, all these workers on the sites are not always yours. They're also subcontractors and other people. Do you take on that piece of the equation as you're going about this? I mean, they're still on the location.
Yeah, we do. And that's interesting as well. So we can address our own employees and our own team in a really maybe prescriptive kind of way so that we can deliver information in an orchestrated manner, frame it in a certain way, but then we don't necessarily have access to our trades in that same way. So our wellness spaces are really a prime example of that. We can install or incorporate into our job sites a wellness space.
Yeah, let's give it a definition, because that was actually the thing that I wanted to talk about. So when I reached out to you, I had seen a post on LinkedIn that you have built these pods, which essentially, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it's kind of a trailer room, not too dissimilar to where we're sitting right now, but probably larger. And it's essentially a place that you can calm yourself down and you can have a restful place and have a mental spot to de-stress. So this is the wellness space that you're referring to. So please continue on what you were saying. So implementing those.
Yeah. So the genesis of this idea or concept was a story that had been told among one of our call it peer groups, but internally, a group designed to really generate, capture, and implement ideas, making good on our intent to be responsive to feedback and those ideas and suggestions being put in front of us. So within this group, there was a story told of years and years ago, a woman who was a new mother and having to pump for the sake of nursing her child and having to do that in a biffy, a portable restroom. And in this particular instance, it was just a real mess, maybe hot, dirty, of course, unsanitary, despite, I'm sure, best efforts of whoever involved. A simple story and something we commonly would have always seen and still may see. But that was the genesis of the idea to try to make a change, to represent that good intention. So we designed this wellness pod, and it's a physical structure similar to this, but able to be transported from point A to point B, from one job site to another. Our realization in having done that was it's quite expensive in terms of material, labor involved, et cetera. And so rather than being really hung up on that one idea, which proved immediately to be successful and was able to garner a lot of attention. We realized we had to pivot or else it wouldn't be sustainable. And the thing with the wellness space is we never entered into it with a design that it would be somehow proprietary, ours alone. We wanted it to be something that could be duplicated or replicated in such a way that our trade partners, other GCs, and whoever could adopt the idea. And so it has pivoted since then. And we do have the trailer, which can be particularly situated strategically on a ground up project. And that was the one you would have seen most recently. In the in-between time, we have begun outfitting office spaces. So if we were in this space, repositioning what would become your office, we would preserve one particular breakout room or what would become a breakout room. And while everything else may be bare concrete and being framed and being fleshed out, that room ahead of time would be situated in such a way that there'd be a chair, a table, a mini fridge, a lamp, a rug, maybe a plant, something to make it feel homey. And then the idea with the wellness space and that concept, no matter the nature of it or the design on it, is a place where someone can decompress, need be, take a call from their child's school, make a call to their doctor, whether it be for an appointment or a follow-up. It could be used for nursing or pumping, that sort of thing. Maybe you have some form of medication you take. And rather than having to leave the job site and find your way to your car, whatever it is.
Historically, that's been the construction mobile office is people's cars. And when you need a place to just take a phone call or call your family or have a doctor's call or whatever else, you're in your car. And it's not exactly the best scenario. It's not exactly the place where you want people to be. And now, I mean, it sounds like what you've done is almost visionary in a way, because a lot of laws are catching up to the things that you've already implemented. Like we actually, as a company, had a nursing room when we have a bunch of young people in this company and having young marriages and babies and the whole 9 yards. And we had to have a nursing room. Didn't have to, but I mean, originally we didn't have to, but we did. And it turned out great. From that perspective, do you have any problems or challenges with people misusing the space? Have you had any productivity challenges or pushback from management that the people who are utilizing the space are not as productive or anything like that? Has there been any problems? I mean, the counter to this?
No, but that brings about an interesting slant on this, I think. So we haven't had an issue with being misused. There is still really a underlying current suggesting that it's not being utilized as much as we would like. There's still a stigma. So that stigma is very much to your point. If someone goes into that space, are they being perceived as someone who then is slacking or taking advantage, and they're just finding a space where behind closed doors, perhaps literally, they can shirk their duties? It's never been our design, of course, nor is it a suspicion that we have. Our intent is that someone enters into that space for whatever the reason, and we're to honor that and respect that. And there's never been, to my knowledge, someone who has taken advantage of it in such a way we would be led to believe someone could be suspect. So the stigma is either this misconception that is being wholly fabricated. It's no more than a figment of someone's imagination. And yet sometimes certain individuals can say one thing, even the slightest thing, and that becomes an influence. And then we have projects too where we may be working among even other GCs or another GC. And if their culture doesn't mirror ours, then that becomes a negative influence. So where we are today, we're in a position where we could look at this as a great idea that behind which we put forth honest effort and found that it didn't land quite the way we had hoped. But then that would suggest we might give up on the idea and turn to something different. In our minds, this is an idea that will continue to catch fire and gain traction. So we're simply at this point in time where we continue to lead by example and show everyone with whom we may come in contact, with whom we may be in range of serving as outreach or resource, or simply some means of confidence in that this is the next step to be taken. We continue to implement these spaces. So we actually have a goal this year of 25 separate spaces, a variety of ground up, repositioning, whatever the nature of the job may be. And frankly, if they go the majority of the year being unused, we're still leading by example to show that the provision, the accommodation is important to us.
Two questions on this front and a statement. My first statement is it sounds a lot like work from home. If you think about it, now we had the pandemic that forced us all to work from home, but everybody's like, oh, you're working from home. Nobody's going to be doing anything. And of course, in construction, you guys don't quite operate the same way as a lot of other industries, but that you're going to slack off. You're not going to be as focused. Your productivity is going to go down, all this stuff. And a lot of those myths were disproven through looking at, now there were negative effects of working from home culturally and otherwise, but the actual productivity, which is what people were worried about, actually went up. And it's a very similar thing. You think if people are utilizing this resource or that their productivity is going to go down. And the reality is that I would imagine being cared for and having a place to defrag and a place to really center yourself, or frankly, I mean, take medications or to nurse or what you need to do. Not only is it giving people the dignity to operate with a new mother shouldn't have to deal with a porta-john to pump. Like, I mean, she deserves the right to have a place to do that. And using that same methodology I really commend you for that. How are you determining if people are using it? If you get 25 of these things, how do you know?
Yeah, so I love that really is based on, that's a fair question because we're not monitoring it. That would be counterintuitive to the spirit of it. But we ask our superintendents, we talk to our guys and gals in the field, and we're asking them, are you using them? Do you see others using them? And they are used, but they're not used as widely as we would like. And we're given a reason. There's a stigma. So it's still a matter of, I think, putting it in a position, framing it in such a way where the numbers are there, meaning the availability is exponentially greater than it would have been. And we simply are in a position where the onus is on us as a company and then as advocates of this, champions of this, to continue to stay the course, preach the message, and when given opportunity, lead by example in a way too where maybe we're using the spaces. I'm not a guy who is on site necessarily all day, every hour of the day, as would be a laborer, an electrician, superintendent, carpenter, etc. So I'm not going to say that seeing me using the space is in license for anyone and everyone to immediately have that supreme confidence to use it. So I think it's more of a matter of education. And the education, I think, is simple as saying, it's okay.
Do you integrate this into your morning stand-ups or your tool talks? Like, do you talk about
Mental health?
not only mental health, but also the use of the pods?
In ways we do. I think everything we do is something that, of course, can be improved upon. So if we talk about it by way of toolbox talks, then that is one thing. But is there a way where we can more openly communicate to the job site at large without it having to occur within that rigid sort of framework? The education piece of this, I think, is really about not just increasing awareness. Awareness, I think, is there. I do think it's sort of the idea of becoming even more academic, but to become more academic and to really kind of train in others this idea of adopting a new mental model around it. You've got to do it in layman's terms. You've got to do it sort of short and to the point. We started out through COVID, especially everyone adopting, it's okay to not be okay. It's great, but we said it to the extent that it became white noise. So we deal with that too. So even the wellness part, if we continue, or space, if we continue to advocate for this and increase the numbers, but we do so without educating our workforce, then that's simply going to become another installation on our job site. So that's really the next chapter, is education.
So shifting gears a little bit. So one of the things that I focus on at Yellowbird, and by the way, we have a philosophy also here of do less better. And for us, do less better we're choosing fundamentally, we only do 4 things. We do trainings, we do site like staffing, we do a fair amount of assessments and surveys like walkthroughs and so forth. And then the last thing, of course, is actual program development. So somebody says, I need a spill management training developed. So we'll do that. So if we just stay focused on those things, and that's a lot within those things, you realize that being a better steward of safety and culture and safety culture, you have to use third parties in many occasions. I mean, as I understand it, 70% of the safety industry is outsourced. So I need to have somebody come to do this toolbox talk. I need somebody to be on site at this location. I don't have the manpower, the woman power, the resource to go to a location. How do you look at subcontracting, finding solution providers around safety programs?
That's a great question. So we partner with, for example, Minnesota OSHA. We partner with a third party where necessary, whether it be in Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, there is a program very similar to Minnesota OSHA, and it's actually through a program facilitated by the University of Wisconsin. So we seek out opportunities that are either quite obvious, like Minnesota OSHA's consultation program, in which we actively participate, or trying to find the equivalent where unto itself may not exist. Wisconsin being an example of that. We have worked in Chicago where we have used third party, invited them in to conduct site safety inspections, really to sort of serve as a means of accountability to us conducting our own inspections. We also partner with AGC. We partner with other GCs, other trade partners, and simply share with them our ideas and what we're doing, hoping they'll show us ways that we can improve. And what we found by doing that is there are some things we're doing where we feel like we may stand an opportunity to improve. And yet what they see in us is that we're actively breaking the mold. And it's funny because then in return, we're looking at them and what we see in them is they're doing incredible things that we want to learn more about and know how to better achieve. So that's really begun to gain a lot of traction. This year alone, the conversation around mental health, for one, has really enabled us to really generate more energy around the idea of simply collaborating. And while we're doing it in the spirit of maybe mental health or maybe it's our safety systems, we're finding that the conversation is very organic and we're talking about all these things all at once. And each of us have strengths and weaknesses. And the beauty of it is rather than competing against one another, we're partnering. And where competition needs to remain a thing because it is a reality, we can do so while still supporting one another and all these other ventures.
Safety, at the end of the day, health, safety, human risk is not a competitive, fortunately, we're all human beings. And as we all know, especially with the turnover in the safety world, unfortunately, there's a high level of turnover in the world that we live in. I wish it weren't the case, but you could be having one business card one day and another business card the next day. And so having those good relationships with your peers and so forth, do you have a standard, from your internal perspective, when you go to, say, Wisconsin OSHA and you ask for their consultative, which is always a challenge, I imagined, because it's like asking a cop, how safe is my car? It's like, you're also like, I hope he doesn't give me a ticket when he finds the problems. That's just an embedded, it's hard to ask somebody who is supposed to be the enforcer or at least the compliance leader to also come and give me an assessment because it's challenging, even though they have the best of intentions and they actually are doing great things. I've talked to many, many OSHA operations, both state and federal. And they all have these programs that you can call them out and they're happy to come and help and give you some feedback. But it's almost like calling the IRS and asking them to take a look at your taxes. And it's like, well, I'm not so confident that I really want to show them the ugly stuff because it's challenging in that environment. Do you have a standard that you, when you hire a third party, if you bring somebody in, that you set the standard for them, or do you let them come through and say, just do a general OSHA walk or a safety, what do you see? How do you do that? Because it is important that you have third parties kind of giving you're using other contractors and other folks, but how do you do that?
So the way we look at it, Wisconsin is a great example. Wisconsin is a federal OSHA state versus Minnesota, who has a state-specific run program. And so through the University of Wisconsin, we had discovered a program to serve as the equivalent to a state-run program. So in order to maintain consistency, that's a program we've used. We've also interacted with federal OSHA. And in either case, it's really not one versus the other. It's a matter of us doing it constructively and with a great sense of humility to simply understand that we don't know everything. And we're not always going to get it right. We're human. And within our nature, there are some things we're going to get wrong, despite our best efforts and nothing but good intentions. Third party, we bring them in. We give them license to come in and do their thing. However you implement your program and however you apply that for each job site or project that into which we may extend invitation, we don't want to dictate how you do it, or else we're not doing a very good job of positioning ourselves in front of the mirror to understand what we're doing well and what we're not. Now, that being said, there have been times where third party simply focuses on things that in the end, we're not as concerned with. And it's not the safety thing that we're not doing right. It's not that we have hazards we in turn ignore. It's a lot of times cultural. The idea of safety culture to me has also become cliche. So although it's something we certainly talk about, it's still the verbiage we use. Personally, I'm becoming more and more cognizant of the fact that culture unto itself now has become quite whitewashed. And so if we were to bring in third party today versus say even a year ago, the conversation would likely be much more direct. And it would, I think, position us in such a way that we would outwardly confess our shortcomings to even third party so that there's no face being put on. It's like, look, you're here because we value the opportunity to learn, whether it's just a second set of eyes to ensure we're not missing something, or it's we don't know everything.
I found that the EHS world has, if you look at the history, in the 70s, it was just your safety manager. And then it was your health and safety manager. And then it became the environmental health and safety manager. And then it became sustainability. And now mental health is coming in. And it seems like everything gets thrown on your position of making sure that you are maintaining this, frankly, a standard that is impossible. And do you bring in people specifically for, say, I want you to do a fall from heights assessment or a forklift training program or heavy equipment training program or lockout tagout? Or do you generally bring in generalists that say, I want you to check out everything? And how do you look at that just from a practical perspective? Because you've got a lot of coverage. I mean, it's a $400 million company. So you've got a lot of things that you're responsible for.
Yeah, and I appreciate that too. We do it in a number of ways. More and more, we've been able to effectively leverage our self-perform workers or SBW field staff in such a way where laborers, carpenters, others have begun to step up and some degree of authority, which they all have. Stop work authority is one thing. Of course, we present that in a way where everyone has stop work authority. In our mind, through our lens, we see it to be extended well beyond even that. We want our folks in the field to have authority to stand on their level of expertise and their background. And so more and more, our field staff have begun doing field inspections, being documented through our software platform.
These are not trained safety professionals per se, but they're experts in their field.
Right. So that has enabled us to better understand what training they may be thirsting after. And so fall protection, it's something we talk about a lot, but yet we discovered that folks wanted training specific to that. So we invited in our case, Minnesota OSHA consultation, and they provided training on fall protection. They provided it in a way where we had brought in basically half of our field staff, superintendents and others one day, and then on another day, the other half.
How was that experience? Like, did it take a while to get it all coordinated?
No, it was actually pretty simple. And I didn't know what the response to it would be because Minnesota OSHA, it's OSHA. It's consultation, not compliance, but it's still Minnesota OSHA. And so there's this perception that to invite them in is somehow inviting the enemy to your door. And it couldn't be further from the truth, has been our experience. And the way it was presented to us, it was such that it wasn't standard says this, therefore, let me share with you all of my experiences, a consultant. And so he would give examples of project sites he had been on, clients he had worked with, without naming names, without disclosing the location. And so for all of us, it looked like every other construction site. And yet there were all kinds of things that were not being done well or being done incredibly well. So we were seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly through OSHA's lens without any form of punitive repercussions, no threat, just a collaborative joint effort. We would use third party to assess our program, to look at certain standards or policy documents. Because again, as well trained as we believe ourselves to be, we're not an expert on all things, right?
Well, that's the thing. So it's funny you should say that because It's the anecdotal stories and the fact that you got a great OSHA trainer that came out, by the way. That's fantastic that that was your experience, because like everybody, there's hit and miss, and how you know you're going to get a great person, how you know they're going to be somebody who is kind and aware and tell the stories and doesn't come out with a stick. But the most important part is they're using their expertise and their background to give real life experiences. One of the things that we've found, you're using software, you said, so you're using software for your tracking and management of these things. When you go to different areas, some of these regulations and guidelines are different. And so you can have a staff member who's in Minnesota and then they go to Wisconsin, and the guidelines are different and best practices are different. And so do you find it difficult to like make sure that you are actually following the right things and doing the right protocols for the area? And then the secondary question is that I know nobody wants to have an incident. Nobody wants to have any kind of a problem, but what is your post-incident strategy? Like, how do you look at somebody unfortunately dropped something on their foot and you have to take care of their medical need, but then you have to look at what happened? How do you manage that? And then how do you manage the insurance aspect of, okay, this is what we're putting in place so that we can show our carrier not to increase our rates, and also that we're doing the right thing, that we're going to do better training around this, and this. It's a devil's eye question.
That's good though. Yeah. So to start with compliance. So we work hand in hand with our broker in such a way that they're a consultative partner to us. And so they are structured in such a way where individuals who are experts in safety will essentially be provided to us, all part of our account and our relationship with them, so that if we're going to be working in a state that we're not altogether familiar with, we can make that call, for example, to them and simply make that statement.
Yeah, those are our customers, by the way. They send our people out a lot of the time, which is great. Just so you know, but that's great. And they're a good resource for you.
Yeah. So we do that though. Again, just really kind of wearing that humility on our sleeve to say, hey, before we get into a situation we don't want to be in, tell me what I'm missing. And then in the event of some form of incident, I think it's an important topic to discuss too, because root cause analysis, right, is very popular, whether it's Taproot or some other format. And I do think it's important. It's an absolute necessity. However, I think like the term culture, root cause becomes watered down so that you drill down until you find it was this. If you do a good job of that, you've understood what sort of human component was involved, whether it was a lack of training, a misuse of some form of tool or application.
Just a mistake.
A mistake, right? Accidents do occur. In the end, though, the root cause is one thing, and maybe ultimately that allows you to arrive at something you can provide to someone else. But I think what we're learning is, as we go through incident investigation, it's really about more so the human interface. How do we get there? It's not just as simple as root cause, I guess, is my only point. In terms of work comp and management there, we're fortunate to be in a position that we perform incredibly well within that space, although we're not perfect. So our EMR is 0.57, and we've worked hard to arrive at that point. But an important part of how we've gotten there is really our ability to work with our third-party administrator rather than simply seeing them as a server, almost something equivalent to a process server. We've gotten better at reaching out to them as well and telling them, this is where we are, maybe this is where we expect you to be, and you're not. And then in turn, they'll explain to us, it's not really the way it works. Like, we're pushing headlong into this thing because we weren't buttoned up. We may know that our employee, our worker is good, back to work. We have an experienced long time. So again, we performed exceptionally well, but we have discovered in the meantime, there are lots of things we've just sort of been lucky in the way that we've done it. It worked itself out. We've learned along the way that there's been a lot of heavy lifting being done by the third-party administrator, while we may have thought, well, it's just the way it works. We're getting smarter, and we're finding ourselves more and more willing to kind of let our own guard down and surrender to the third-party administrator while being very direct with them, telling them, this isn't the way we see it. Tell me what I'm missing. And then they will. Or sometimes there's a learning opportunity on their end too.
Absolutely. Look, we're all human, and unfortunately, TPAs tend to put you in a statistical number. That's just the nature of the business, right?
Unless you work with them in a way where you begin to see in one another the humanity that's involved in all of it. And then those conversations become much more almost personal, if not entirely personal and organic. And you're not just working among metrics and the arrival at this moderate. It's something much more than.
Yeah, we work with a lot of insurance companies and TPAs. And one of the things that they use us for is to do surveys to identify standards at all locations and then next step. So we actually, from a practical perspective, one of the things that's interesting, and I think more people need to be doing things this way. It wasn't our idea. It was the insurance company or the TPA's idea, which is we need to understand, but we also need to action. Because one of the things that happens, unfortunately, in this pencil whipping world of ours is that you identify, hey, you've got a spill issue over here, or we've caught a couple of people that weren't strapped in the way they should be, need to get a fall protection program going. And it's like, oh, okay, we'll get on that. And then life happens and the world is busy and resources are tight. And then they don't action, or they action slower than you'd like them to for many, many reasons. And we're all running businesses. That's the thing that people have to remember. All of this costs money and time. And so one of the things that I think is interesting is how people are actioning feedback. Do you have a methodology that you use to action feedback? So like you've mentioned probably a half a dozen awesome feedback loops where somebody says this could be done better, or you need maybe better training here, or your TPA has given you some guidance. How do you prioritize those things? And then how do you action them? Because you don't have a huge team, do you? How many people are on your safety team?
3 individuals referred to me.
Yeah, so you've got 3 people that are responsible for a lot of moving parts. And so what do you do to prioritize these findings from all these areas? And do you track them in one place? That was the other thing I was wondering is how do you action them?
Yeah, so one area, and I appreciate the question, because one area where we've seen improvement even just this year is among our safety committee. So we've always had a safety committee, and every year it's been some form of reiteration or evolution of what it might have been prior. But this year, it's particularly taken on a form that frankly has been much more productive. And we've positioned ourselves in a way where it's being led truly more by the team itself, rather than more so what's meant to be more of the facilitator or administrator, someone such as myself. So I've been able to take a bit of a back seat and really even learn through them. And what may be fed to them is some of this feedback that we're getting. But rather than taking it upon myself or a small team to figure out and then dictate to others, we're just sort of opening it up to the safety committee. We may talk to our senior PMs, our general superintendent, and look at it from more of a global perspective and say, look, these are all the things we're hearing. We have ideas, but we don't know if those are the best ideas. So I think to your point earlier, the money aside, it's very time intensive. So I think the understanding is we have to simply embrace that. We've got to acknowledge it for what it is, and that if we want to grow and we want to get better and we want to improve and make good on the feedback that we're soliciting, we've got to be willing to invest the time. So our safety committee is a big part of that. We do have those groups. The Pulse group is by name what I had referred to earlier, where the genesis of the Wilderness Pod came about. That group and others are smaller in number, but of course focused in different ways. And globally, as a team, we do a good job of saying, hey, last month in our Pulse group or last month in our safety committee, these are some things we talked about. And so now we're talking to people who weren't specifically part of those smaller groups, but we're shedding light on some of the conversation. So the narrative becomes much more collaborative and more of a collective effort.
You know what I'm just going to say it because I've seen recently a movement towards quarterly standardized programmatic trainings where you set a budget where every quarter you're doing some kind of a findings-based, like ecosystems-wide training system. I have a few customers that are doing it, but having this Pulse group who has kind of a understanding of what's going on, one of the things that we've been seeing a lot, because there's over 600, and a lot of people don't understand this, in safety, in quotes, there's 600 specialties. I mean, you don't realize it as you're going along. Industrial hygiene alone and airborne particulates and respirator fit testing and all these things, like you've got arc flash and lockout tagout, and like you've got all these things. And as you go down this path, but there's always a theme. There's always like 5 or 6 company-wide that okay, if we got turnover, we've got all these things. One of the things we might want to explore together at some point or have a chat about is doing that kind of thing where you do like a systematic approach. Have you done things like that where you like set on a cadence, and whether it be with Yelbert or anybody else, I don't really care, but well, I do care, but let's be honest. But is it the kind of thing that you have looked at doing as you like, so you can at least be on a cadence that that we have a training coming up and we haven't chosen what the subject is yet, and we are going to be doing this because this region is having challenges with X, whatever it is. You guys doing that kind of thing?
Yeah, I like that. We actually this year hired an individual who was able to join my team as a sustainability and risk management specialist. So through her effort this year alone, which has been now a matter of not even 5 months, through her effort, the suggestion was brought forth that we really should invest the time and quarterly going through specific sections of our safety manual. Now, the intent of that exercise would be to improve our safety manual. Based on what you're just now saying, that would be a perfect opportunity to tie in with that some form of training, because we are going to focus on a specific topic, albeit a section of safety manual, but that topic will most assuredly represent a training opportunity.
Yeah, the manual is only as good as the operations that support it, right?
That's right. So actually, I like what you're saying.
Yeah, so it's funny because when we started 5 years ago, I really thought that folks were going to use us mostly for on-site staffing because we have 7,000 people. So somebody says, I have a project for 5 months, we're a perfect fit. There's no fees. It's a good solution for that. And that's what I thought we'd be used for mostly. But now people are using us for surveys to identify things that we need for our manual and for our training. So you go out to these sites and you're finding the good, which is what we try to focus on, find the good. People don't do that in this industry. It's like when you go onto a site and you're doing 97% of the stuff really well, nobody focuses on that. They just pounce on the 3%. And it's a problem with this industry because I don't know why they feel that it doesn't bring value unless they do that. For me, I love the concept of survey to identify challenges solutions through training, and training supported through policy. And if you get that cycle going quarterly, especially with, frankly, the turnover that we're all having in this industry based on we've got a lot of illegal workers, we have alien workers, we've got issues that are going on with turnover in certain trades. And so you're always playing whack-a-mole of, okay, has everybody had their training? Like it's hard to make sure that everybody's like up to speed.
Yeah, it is hard.
Well, I'm going to ask you one last question and then we're going to wrap it up. And obviously we look forward with you as well on anything else that you want to cover. But as we look at what we're doing in an industry and as we land this podcast, so as we land on something actionable, and what 3 things from a leadership perspective, and you can call it improving culture, although it's such an overused word, I agree, reducing risk, supporting teams better. What are the 3 things that you think have been meaningful in your world for running a effective, impactful safety program?
Yeah, I love that question. It's a little difficult to answer, right? Because a lot of things come to mind. But narrowing it down, though, I think it's supremely important to lead with transparency. And it's the first thing that comes to my mind, because as leaders, we do talk a lot today about that sense of vulnerability. But I think that sense of vulnerability can be as simple as being willing to lead with transparency. So as I set out to lead by example as a safety director, I could do that through the application or leveraging of standard policy procedure. And I wouldn't be wrong for doing that. That's a way we ensure safe work. But I do that by also adding a layer of transparency to it so that if it's a matter of standard, for example, that is difficult to execute, then I'm going to acknowledge that. And I'm going to say to the workers in the field, this one's tough. It's not something you're going to want to do. I wouldn't want to do it if I were you, but we have to. So let's talk about how together we arrive at that point. What that's opened up for me is really the understanding that we need to take a lot of our processes and or procedures and strip them down and really just focus on a few key elements and allow that exercise to produce more organic conversation in the field, incorporating this means of compliance or execution. Second, in terms of how leadership presents, I do think it's also equally important to be assertive. Again, in today's climate, you are wanting to cater to almost everything, whether it's a matter of personalities involved or some form of sensitivity to a particular topic or manner of approach, etc. I think we've got to understand that while those things exist and there's benefit in being more sensitive to a number of things, what folks need from us as leaders is our ability to be assertive, to make decisions, to command some form of change or action. And in that, we may sometimes get it wrong. We may make the wrong call. We may be guilty of some form of misstep. So then it's important, together with transparency, that we own that. 3 things, right? I got one more. I think the third thing is humility. And I think all these things can kind of follow the same vein. But humility is important because I think that puts us in a position as leaders to pause, take a breath, listen to the room around you. Like, what are you hearing? Are people interacting with one another? Or is everyone heads down doing their work? Well, that could be a good thing. Are you seeing communication? Are you hearing communication? Are folks approaching you with ideas, suggestions, or is there a sense that, why would I? They don't even listen. So I think humility is a big part of that because not everybody is good at it. I'm quick to jump to some form of solution. So I've got to remind myself to pause, take a breath. Maybe for me, then that's less but perfect. Settle into it. We hire our trade partners and we hire our workers, whether it be field or office, with the intent that there really not be any real distinction between the two, first of all, field and office. That's not the company we want to be. Everyone is one team. We say of ourselves 1G, Gardner, 1G. That's inclusive of whatever your role might be. So if that distinction isn't being made unfairly, unjustly, unnecessarily, in fact, if it is being made, then there's some form of sin being committed within that equation. But sometimes that's hard. If we position ourselves in a way where, as leaders, we're listening, we should be able to take something that a senior PM is saying and share that idea with our superintendent, our laborer, giving them maybe an opportunity to find some sort of accord with that. Or maybe they can expose some degree of short-sightedness in that. And then we realize, okay, we have an opportunity. So I think those things are important. But the humility piece of that is me, for example, going to someone and saying, I want your opinion. I don't need you to accept mine. And the more we do that, the better we are.
So my takeaways from this conversation, Brett, you are an exceptional leader. I really commend you. You obviously live the practices of what you're saying, and that's not common. So thank you for being here and communicating that. And also your company is lucky to have you because it's not something that you find very often. So I hope that they appreciate it, and I believe that they do. From everything that I've seen, at least on LinkedIn, your leadership seems to be a very, very caring leadership. But my takeaway from this conversation, to wrap it up, is transparency, humility. 2 ears in one mouth is the reason we exist. Listen more, talk less, and take feedback with good intention. And for me, that is the sign of leadership. And so I'm excited about what you're doing. If there's anything that we at Yellowbird can do to help you, I would love to do so. But whatever it is that you are doing, whether I can help you or I can point you in the right direction, I would be honored to do it. So thank you for joining me. And I wish you a safe travels back to, you're in Minnesota, correct? Yep. So he came out to visit me in person here in Phoenix, Arizona. And so it's going to be 100 degrees here today. So I'm sure he's ready to go home.
Just soak it up.
And thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
My pleasure. That's it for today's episode of the Canary Report. If this conversation helped you reframe how you think about risk and safety, please do me a favor. Hit subscribe, leave a review, and share it with somebody who needs to hear it. We're building a new category of safety and risk leadership, one that's faster and smarter. Leaders who aren't just empowered by tech, but whose wisdom is accelerated by it. To learn more about how Yellowbird's cutting-edge platform is empowering leaders to solve workplace safety and risk challenges faster, smarter, and at scale, visit goyellowbird.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Yellowbird pages to stay up to date. Until next time, lead with clarity, know first, and act fast.